I guess we're just going to enjoy the ride like we've been enjoying the ride of Nancy Drew.
Mm-hmm.
And we do
Mm-hmm.
have a double feature. So we're doing episode 8 and episode 9. Episode 8 brought us right back into the plot involving Bess and her surprise husband, who turns out to be her fake husband, thankfully.
Forgot all about this.
Me too.
I forgot about everything we'd watched before. It's been like a month since we watched. But I quickly like acclimated to where we left off, and I loved episode 8. Did you guys love episode
Yeah.
8? I
Yes,
loved
good.
this episode so much. I loved seeing Bess have her own kind of story and her being kind of unmoored, like she's being dragged in two different directions, and we get to know more about her life before coming to Horseshoe Bay, which was exciting. That opening scene at the airport, I was like, yes, Bess, yes.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I enjoyed about it the most, because Bess has consistently been one of the show's MVPs, or she's like helped them solve the crime, or when it is a story that focuses on her, you have to see it unfold through Nancy's eyes, whereas Bess very much had the like A arc of this episode. Like you really got to learn more about her and kind of what drove her. We know her very well by now, but the fact that there are still secrets there and that she's still insecure about her past. And I also like the fact that we learned more just about that dynamic she had with her Aunt Diana, because up until now, Aunt Diana's kind of been like a, how do I say this? Slightly one-dimensional character, because she goes where the plot needs her to, and she had more and more emotional involvement in this episode. And yeah, I really like learning more about Bess and her family.
Yeah, because Aunt Diana is very fancy and
Mhm.
rich, and that was the end of her. Like, that
Yeah.
was, she was,
I have beef with Aunt
Yeah.
Diana.
because she
Shall
left
I
her in
get
the woods
into
like
it?
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like oh God, Aunt Diana. She wants Bess to devote all of her time, energy, and loyalty to the Marvin family, but she drops Bess at the drop of a hat. And like, granted, yes, Bess did steal a very expensive watch from her, which was masterfully pulled off, which I would have given her credit. Like, you stole that from me? I would have been so impressed. And I understand like sh- Bess broke her trust, but it's like your family is so important to you. But at the drop of a hat, you're going to ditch this girl in the middle of the dark woods and say she's out of the family when you wanted her to bend over backwards for you. I was angry. I didn't
Mhm.
like it.
Mhm.
And maybe that's my bias towards Bess. Like, how could you do that to sweet, innocent Bess? She was just trying to do what was right at the time. And I don't know. I was just mad at Aunt Diana. Like, how dare you?
I knew Bess was gonna fail the moment Aunt Diana said, "You have to put the Marvins first."
Yeah.
And I was like, she hasn't been with you long enough to do that when her friends are in danger. And of course, it's exactly what happened. I wanted her to be able to tell her aunt. But then there was also a small part of me that was growing louder as the episode went on, wondering whether or not her aunt had actually gotten her fake husband to come to town to test Bess. Like, the episode doesn't reveal that, but it just felt like something she would do. She does seem like a woman who keeps everything close to her vest and would test you without your knowledge to see if you will be loyal, even though you've only known her for like a few weeks to a few months. I don't know. The timeline in Nancy Drew always messes me up because things are happening much slower than I thought they are.
But yeah, I agree. I feel like Aunt Diana is always that character that she can be brought in here whenever they need her to do something or whatever. But it was only around the time that Owen died, you really kind of got to see what kind of person that she was, because she adored him, and yet wasn't too caught up about the fact that he was dead and was happily like filing paperwork or whatever at his funeral when all hell was breaking loose in the floor on the floor below. Didn't bat an eyelid about that. Aunt Diana is someone who cares about the family name but doesn't actually care about the family in it, if that makes sense. And I think that really came
hypocritical.
across.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really came across in this episode. And so Bess did test her, and unfortunately Bess failed that test. Yeah, it was a bit predictable for me, and it escalated maybe kind of quickly, but I do understand the fact they only had 40 minutes to use. I wonder if that's the end of it, and I hope it's not, because I feel like there should be more there. But like with the Marvins and heck, the Hudsons as well, you never know what kind of way those families will go, because they're kind of just driven by power, name, and money.
Yeah, and it'd be lovely if Bess gets to recognize that for herself after she like gets through grieving the loss of the Marvins, because there's that great moment where she's at, I'm assuming, lunch with her aunt, where they're talking about the difference between the speech Bess wants to give, which is about the family's legacy, and the speech her aunt wants her to give, which is about the silver. Because that's what everybody wants. She's like, everyone wants to see the silver. They don't really care about the family. It gave a great dichotomy for how they see the Marvins. Diane is she's very surface. She's like, we had to present ourselves a certain way. And because Bess doesn't have family, she's like, no, our best foot forward is presenting us as a family, a united front, not just what everyone thinks that we should be.
It's very vacuous at like surface level with the Marvins and Aunt Diana, whereas Bess wanted to like commit more and learn to trust these people and learn to love these people. And it feels like as far as Aunt Diana is concerned, as long as you do what she wants or what's good for the family in the old fashioned sense of the word, you're part of this family. But the moment you stop doing that, even if it's for the family's best interest, even if it's for your best interest or some other people's best interest, you're out. It's very old fashioned. And I think the show accomplished that very, very well.
She doesn't need him. Whatever.
No.
I don't know. Not to get ahead. I think she said like, I don't have any family. And I was like, girl, we went over this in the previous episodes. Your family is your group of friends.
Yes.
So cut it out.
She'll get there. Perhaps she'll just need a talk from Ryan, who understands, because he's a Hudson. He's done the performance of it all and still has to do the performance to keep Nancy safe. Those scenes with the reporter were interesting.
Yeah, they had quite an interesting chemistry, but at the same time, you're like, they did a good job of building up the tension because you were afraid that secret was going to come out about Nancy being a Hudson. And then I think they did it so well because they had such a good like dynamic between the two of them. They were talking like friends, you know, the way the reporters usually don't like the rich people, whereas Ryan did a great job of making himself come across as friendly, because we always said he had that in him, but he always chose the opposite. And I think this was an example of how far he had come. He did everything he was supposed to, and you watched the whole episode thinking, is he going to let something slip? Is he going to like let everyone down? And he didn't, but the reporter knows more. And yeah, now we're in like dangerous territory, and it wasn't even his fault.
Yeah, that stressed me out so much because I was kind of like, oh, this could be cute. Like, oh,
yeah,
shipping them. And I was like, mind your business. Stay away from Nancy.
I remember her though, so I'm interested to see from the episode with Tom. So I'm interested to see how this dynamic shapes and where we get to that point with her. In Ryan, I like a good nosy reporter, like who throws everything off whack, especially when they're simmering a bit, because the rest of them don't know that she knows. Because I don't believe Ryan told Nick that she's suspicious, correct?
No, we didn't have that scene, I don't think, no.
Because Nick would be like, all hands on deck, fireball on fire, like we have to get rid of the reporter. But Ryan's like, no, gotta snooze, okay? We have to like present ourselves as calm, cool, and collected. And that's not who Nick is when people he cares about is in danger. As we saw in episode 9, which we won't jump to yet, but like he's a very take charge, man of action type of character. And Ryan's like, we don't take action yet. We sip tea. And we lie to the press.
He did leap to action though in episode 8 when Nancy and George were tied up, which that was so stressful. This show does suspense so well. Like I know nothing was going to happen to them, but the whole time I was like, no, blow out the candle. when they finally got into wherever they were being held hostage, in the what was it? The thing fell. It was tied to a rope.
Of weight, right? It was going to crush. It was going to break. Was it a lantern? And
yeah, the lantern. When Ace put his hand on the rope and stopped it, I was like, lost my breath.
Yeah, those few seconds they dragged.
There's a great moment too, though, because it also used the action sequence as a means of Nick being read in on the whole George is possessed by Odette situation, which George was trying her darndest to keep from him. But I'm glad that he knows though, because that's not going to sustain itself. George, you live together, do you not? Like he's going to find out.
And that's the thing. And when this episode started, I was like, oh no, we're doing secrets again. I forgot about that. Even though I do understand the reasoning behind it, she didn't want to add to his stress. But I'm glad the episode ended with him finding out. I thought it was very funny when he came towards Odette and tried to help her, and she started like screaming French at him, and he was like, "You're not George." Very effective because again, the show uses tension to get the secrets out. And And yeah, we'll talk about how that built into the next episode. There wasn't much in this, but the point is, I'm glad the secret's out now. We didn't have to go episode upon episode upon episode of trying to keep the secret from Nick.
And it flows right into it though, because we have the whole shroud reveal about the next person who uses it will kill the person who was used it last, which surprising turn of events.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can't catch a break.
They can't. Every time they think that, like, okay, we're safe, we're cool, and there's some supernatural hijinks that then have to ensue because you're not safe, you're not cool. This is Horseshoe Bay. It isn't no chill.
And it was interesting that they both Nancy was struggling with feeling guilt over the fact that her using the shroud to save George ended up killing the previous person who used it. Or Jenkins. And the fact is, it's because Nancy's so used to soldiering on. She's programmed like that. She gets on with it. But you saw in the moment when they thought they were going to die that she was like, wait, what kind of person does things like that? And I thought that was very effective. It didn't sit with it very long, but I do think that throughout season 2, we're starting to see Nancy sit with her actions more. And again, we've said how she needs to learn a lot, and she has been learning. So I really appreciated the fact that we got to see her sit with those events and the consequences of them more, because in season 1 she was very much mission driven and get it done, and then like again she was responsible for the whole Iglesias dilemma, the fact that her friends' lives were at stake, and that came up towards the end, well, season 2, in the early season 2. But I mean, like, she's learning more as it goes on, and yeah, just as someone who's such a big fan of Nancy and wants her to grow, seeing those little moments means the world, and I thought they were very effective, and as always Kennedy did a great job.
She did.
Yeah. And I feel like even though things are still really heavy, we're seeing a different side of Nancy. I think in 208, she was a little bit more unserious and a little bit more casually playful. There's that, I think it was 208 when Nancy and George were like slouched on the couch, and Nancy was like talking about a plan about like killing somebody, and George was like, what? And she's like, I'm just talking through. The way that Kennedy played it was like so funny, and we don't get to see Nancy be a little bit like playful, and it was really fun to see that side of her.
It was great, especially because like it's the scene in which Nancy reveals that she would have probably flatlined George in order to see what
that was what it was. She was like, you're gonna flatline me? And she was like, I'm just
heck is an option. It's just weighing all the options. Another comedic beat, which is also a shippy beat, was when Odette starts talking about the one with the nice eyes, and Nancy immediately thinks that she's talking about Ace.
Screamed.
Yeah.
I screamed. It ended up being Bess, right?
Yeah. It ended up being Bess, but I love how like Nancy's got Ace on the brain though, because she mentioned the nice one with the one with the nice eyes who has a husband, and Nancy still went Ace.
And then she went Bess? Yeah. Oh, like she didn't care.
No.
We're getting crumbs, y'all.
Oh my god, I was flipping out. I was like, Nancy, you said it.
Especially because she's like, as they reveal, just gonna jump to episode 9. She believes that she knows Ace rather well. Like, I don't remember if she said that she knows him the best, but like she was teasing him about his lucky pullover, which is like that is a friend thing, because it's just a regular navy blue pullover. She just snaps. She's like, I know you're into Amanda because you're wearing the lucky one.
That whole scene though, just the fact how close they were, how they had this moment where they stopped and like looked at each other really closely. Yeah, again, crumbs, but like I feel like that was such a like powerful scene because they know each other so well. And I love the fact that this show isn't doing the whole, like, as far as the slow burn goes, making them like think endlessly about each other. They've just picked up that they know each other so well, and I feel like it's going to hit them in the face at some point. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I do feel that way about you. But it's being done in such a subtle way that if we didn't know where it was going, you might miss it. You know what I mean? I think that's very effective.
I was just going to say that because we know that they become a thing, we're looking out for it and we're picking up on these things. But I think that if we were binge watching the show with no knowledge of where it ends up, I don't know if it would be as blatant. We would probably pick up on it, but it wouldn't be like something that we're actively rooting for because we know that it happens. We would just be like, oh, okay, well, they're besties or something. I don't know. But yeah, I love their scenes together. And Ace had a lot of funny like one-liners. He was like, the woods speak to me. There's
Yeah.
another moment that he had me just like dying, but I love him. He's the sweetest little guy.
He was fabulous in this episode with his crush too. Not that I don't really feel anything for him and Amanda, but like he was
Yeah.
very much like a puppy when she wouldn't reveal something I said to her in confidence. And I was like, Ace, how long have you known Amanda? And you're talking about her not revealing something to her twin brother. But okay, sure, if you believe that, which he was correct. But I was just like, I don't know. I don't necessarily trust Amanda that quickly as far as the team secrets.
I think that's the biggest issue with it all taking place off screen, because I know wasn't Amanda in like not the episode before, but the episode before that, and suddenly they're like very what's the word? They're connected to each other all of a sudden, and I guess we just had to take that leap because those characters aren't main characters yet. But yeah, I mean, like they paid it off well in the episode, but I agree for those first couple of minutes, they were like, how invested in this like relationship and this arc? How quick is it supposed to have moved? Or are we supposed to be? But on the Ace note, I love the fact that he stayed with Bess overnight and just like the platankers all the way. I love them. I love
I thought
it so
he
much.
was gonna call her out when she said she had no family, and it cut to him. I was like, Ace, say it, and then he didn't, but that's fine. And another Ace moment I loved. We're hopping all over the place, but it's okay. When they discovered the shroud was missing, and they're in that weird area of the restaurant, which somehow is like enormous. They're like, did they steal anything else? And they look and they cut to Ace and he's like, a banana cream pie. And at the time it seemed so random, but it ended up being the smoking gun that they needed. Because when they go to confront Gil, Nick is like, pie crumbs on his shirt. And I was like, amazing.
You're like, sure. And I really feel like Ace really tied this episode up together in terms of the comedic relief, because it was actually a really heavy episode, considering the plot is Gil being okay with killing George in order to get information about what happened to his mom. And Michael, something that you had said earlier now has me realizing that why Nancy would understand Gil's perspective, because she too rushes in and doesn't have patience for a lot of things. And that's exactly what Gil was doing in this episode. He knew the consequences, wasn't stopping long enough to actually let those consequences sit with him. And the episode kind of coddles him, like it holds his hand, like because
Nancy literally
fine.
holds his hand.
Yeah.
Which I was like, what? But whatever.
Yeah, I was like, the romance plot of this is greasing some of the wheels, but fine. Because I feel like Nick was the one who had the right energy after you learn that the person who's going to use the shroud knows what's going to happen and they're doing it anyway, and they're putting you on a time clock. But okay. But I did think that it was a really emotional thing to have these twins weighing with the fact that they may not ever find out what happened to their mom, regardless of the fact that we do find out that she left them because she was going through delusions and she didn't want to I guess drag them into that mental breakdown with her. But I still don't see why we didn't just come back years later. But that's a choice that was made.
The fire monster is going to become the next villain of the week.
I can see the connection between Nancy and Gil, to your point, Sabrina, where like she recognizes that he rushes into things. And I think in this episode she would have been like, oh, I probably would have done that too a few months ago, but growth. She was like, I have people now that pump the brakes for me, that would tell me to like, let's take a beat and think this through. And again, I'm jumping through things, but there was a part where Nancy, George, and Nick were like talking about the plan, and Nick very much had a different idea of what they should do. And then George was like, I agree with Nancy. And I love when Nick just like gets so like fed up, but he just has to like surrender to them. It's the funniest thing. I love when Nick has that dad energy of like, like I can't win, I give up. But he's still like, he's down to ride. He'll be right by your side, even if he doesn't agree with what's going on. So yeah, I wanted to mention that because I love that. It makes me laugh so much, the dynamic between them, where like Nancy's like, she's never going to she's never going to concede. She's going to be like, I've thought this through and this is what we're going to do.
And I think that adds a lot to the dynamics because Nick never really had a say when it came to Nancy. And it's funny that he kind of does have a say more when it comes to George. They work better as a unit than him and Nancy did because Nancy wasn't in the right place at that time. Whereas now that George is like, siding's the wrong word, but now that George and Nancy have become kind of this like unlikely duo and they do things together and they make decisions together. Because obviously in the previous episode they went off on their own together. Now George is completely supportive of Nancy's way. It was hilarious to see Nick react, but it was also, I think it's great that George and Nancy are becoming kind of like, again with George, can you really say closer? But they're trusting each other better, and I love that dynamic so much, and I love the development of it.
George and Nancy, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay, I got mixed up in my head. There was that one scene where Nancy asked George, "Do you trust me?" And she goes, "Why?" Yes, but why?
Yeah.
And I thought that was like the most indicative of how their friendship has grown, where George is still kind of unsure, but she trusts Nancy with her life. And I think that's like the highest compliment George can pay somebody.
It is. I think a lot of that stems from the use of the shroud, that when George like walked through death's door, because she didn't even knock on it, she was through it, Nancy pulled a wild card and saved her. And I think that meant a lot to George, who, you know, she's always takes care of herself. And yes, Nick has been taking care of her, but it was nice to have a friend who was like, no, regardless of the consequences, forget them, we'll worry about it later. I'm throwing the shroud on you and I'm hoping it works. And it did.
Yeah. And when Nancy, she says to Nick, I'm not going to let anything happen to George, she means that. She will go through hell and high water, and she has. And again, she solved a 14-year-old cold case to save her friend. So like she's going to go to the ends of the earth to save her friends.
And I think that's the reason George is kind of like sways towards her when it comes to things like this, because we've seen this in drama so many times that the love interest or the other half of that person is more emotionally involved. So they'll be like, wrap them in cotton wool and protect them at all costs. Whereas Nancy has more of that kind of stone cold approach of like, I will get this mission done, and Nick, sure, you stay safe. And I think George kind of needed that in that moment, because Nick was like, no, we need to do whatever we can just to keep George safe. But George wanted the mission dealt with. She wanted it all over, not just the fact that she could stay safe for now. She wanted it dealt with, and she knew Nancy was the way of getting that done. And they always say, if you want to increase the stakes on something, put a clock on it. And well, they had a clock in this episode, and I think that's why Nancy was also the most important person to do this for Gil, because we said that already. She was where he was, but she also learned from it. So I think that's what made her the right person, because yeah, it looked like she was putting the mission ahead of George, but the only reason she was doing this was to save George. So it was like Nancy was like, I've been there, I know how to fix this, and she helped Gil get to a similar situation. So for being such an intense, story-driven, standalone kind of episode, there was a lot of beautiful character work in there as well, and I really appreciate that about the show, because it constantly does it.
Does, and it lets them also make mistakes, because Nancy's very aware that she should not be getting into a relationship with Gil or trying to move that needle in any way. And Ace even warns her about it because he knows her, and she decides to do it anyway, which is funny to me also because during that scene that they're talking, she's gazing at him. She gazes like twice. I'm like, okay, so we're going to after Gil, but you're gazing at Ace as he types away on this computer. I would just like, have we reflected internally at all?
Yeah, that was confusing.
There's so much to unpack in that scene.
So much, including Ace's crush with Amanda, that's how they were able to, part of the way that they were able to solve what happened to the mom. I also love that Ace and Nancy go to the art gallery. We just like a quick little pop over scene for some hoity-toityness, and like a look at I wouldn't even know what to call that painting. I don't know what style it is, but they are able to bring it back after somehow using Nick's money to get it. And they find the portrait of Gil and Amanda's mom.
The comedy in that scene though was great too, where Nancy was like, oh, and now we can use your bathroom. Ace said something too that had me cackling. I don't remember what it was now. But I loved it. They're so good together, the two of them.
Such a double act.
Yeah.
Well, we also had a double act in this episode unexpectedly with Bess and Carson, which
I
was really
loved
cute.
it.
Yeah.
You can like, I'm starting to warm up to Carson. Like it's been a journey. I still don't really trust him, but I see where he's been coming from. But he just wanted to dad. He wanted to be a dad
Yeah.
so bad. And Nancy hasn't like gotten to that point where she's gonna let him fully dad her
Mhm.
or parent her. I keep saying dad as a verb. But he saw an opportunity to help Bess. Like that kind of parental intuition to know like, oh, she's heartbroken, she's the kind of person that could use a project as a distraction. And it was so sweet that he let her do that. Like that was right up Bess's alley to like control something, and she doesn't always have the control in the group. So for him to give her that opportunity to, you know, find that confidence within herself was really great. Bonus points to Carson. Good
I
for him.
know. She called it a trick and he referred to it as a nudge. But like I get why he wanted to use that word because she sort of felt bad that he had to do that. But I'm like, it was a trick, Carson. Like it was the best like Jedi mind trick, like parent thing. Cause they always get you to like, oh, you're wallowing. I'm gonna let you wallow for like an hour. Then I'm gonna come in with something that you need to do and tell you to sit up so I can see your eyes. And then suddenly, within 5 minutes, we're gonna be doing the task together, and you're gonna forget about the terrible thing that had happened. And that has been used on me so many times. And every time I fall for it.
I don't know though if I liked the complete follow through where she used his like speech, his lesson to talk Odette off of a literal ledge.
Yeah.
I was kind of like,
Mhm.
it felt like they shoehorned that in because it was such a quick out of nowhere scene for Odette to be like, I'm gonna rejoin my love. And then Bess was the voice of reason with Carson's fake whatever that was. I was like, it felt like it did a little too much to get
It
like
did.
Bess out of her slump. And I didn't love that scene on the
Yeah.
ledge.
Yeah, you know, when you watch an episode, you never know how many minutes are left or whatever. When we find out that George or that Odette had ran off, obviously in George's body.
I thought that was the end of the episode.
I thought that was the end of it. Yeah, exactly.
Like we have another act.
Wow. So, but I would have been happy with that being the end because I feel like all the arcs reached their point. Bess, it's not a lesson, but from a dramatic, story-driven standpoint, Bess learned her lesson of the episode. Everything was fine, but I do feel like that final act kind of then maybe did too much because when Bess showed up in the scene, it was like, first of all, she obviously supposed to have a purpose because Nick and Bess is such an unusual pairing. Like, why would the two of them suddenly be there?
Yeah, that was so weird at the call
Exactly.
when Nick and Bess were talking. I was like, okay.
Yeah,
I'll go with it, but
I
it
mean,
just feels so random.
It served a purpose, but then the fact that, you know, when a character learns a lesson and they can then apply that lesson to a situation in real life and they're like, oh wow, it worked. This was literally word for word the exact same lesson she learned, and I was like, I'm not sure this is the situation really called for.
Yeah, she did the monkey thing, and I was like,
yeah, multiple lessons actually.
I was with you in the beginning, and then she like put every metaphor in, and I was like, a few steps too far.
Yeah, I think we didn't know that if it pleases the court or even if it doesn't. Like even if she wanted to say if it pleases you and even if it doesn't, because she was trying to be formal because Odette is French. And then just got into what she wanted to say, that maybe would have been fine, but I felt like they wanted to like put in comedy where comedy wasn't needed. Like George is literally going to fall to her death. We don't really need to have a wandering speech about spider monkeys and growth. Like she really could have used the lesson of losing the Marvins to talk to Odette about loss and moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And because it was Nick that ultimately got through to her in the end, it was like, well, then why was Bess there? Because the lesson that she learned didn't work.
She was just like, she watched them kiss and she was just like celebrating on her own.
She's like, yeah, it's like, okay.
And on this note, I have to say, I'm ready for them to figure out how to separate Odette from George. Like, as much as I love Leah's French accent, she's killing it. She's serving. I've had it. I'm ready for her to like move forward.
Odette feels the same. I mean, I've enjoyed her like one-liners. Like I appreciate, like I laughed when she called Nancy a bedbug, and And when she like mocked Nick for always asking George if she's okay, he's like, she's like, can she ever have her thoughts? Can they just stay in her?
Yeah.
And that was a good critique of him.
Yes.
Mhm.
But like now that she's done observing the world and she's reached a point where she wants to leave, let's have her leave next episode or put her on the track to be able to leave. I really enjoy her, but she's gonna start staying her welcome.
We need some movement.
Yeah, I feel like they're slowly trying to turn her into one of the members of the Drew crew before she like departs, because she is helping them in little things. At first you thought she was a real like danger, and she is a danger to George in the sense that she can do anything with her body, but she's not a danger to the team in the way that it was initially portrayed that she would be. So I feel like they're definitely going to try and turn her into a like honorary member of the Drew crew before she leaves. And I mean, like, it works, but I mean, like, how many episodes do we have to do that for? I think the story's reached where it needs to go right now, so hopefully it won't stick around too much longer.
Mm-hmm. Especially because she's not Lucy, and I miss Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
I miss her weird little pop-ups, and Nancy really was kind of the one who saw her all the time. And with Odette, everyone is interacting with Odette, so it's kind of wearing thin. But there's
when that light bulb flickered, I'll say this really quickly. When the light bulb flickered in that weird art room in that guy's house, I was like, Lucy? Talking to Nancy? But that's not what it was.
Oh, that would have been great.
I thought somebody was communicating with Nancy, but it was just a light bulb.
Yeah.
I didn't expect to miss Lucy so much, but I think it's just because they didn't have they had an emotional goodbye to her, but we didn't actually see Lucy like just disappear. So he just stops coming around. Just like, I needed that for like I need a cathartic goodbye, Lucy, and your creepiness will miss you moment. And we never got it. But last point before wrapping up, Nancy Drew, we got a tad bit more of Ace and his family he doesn't know anything about, because he got a text message from his brother.
Again, I forgot all about this.
Yeah, you can tell. And it was the only reason they did something quite clever in the early part of the episode. Where was it that Amanda said something about you don't know what, or a brother, or she mentioned family member or a brother or whatever, and he said something, and I can't remember what it was, but it implied that actually I do know what you're talking about. It was very clever, so it prepared me for when it came back up at the end. But yeah, I feel like that's going to be one of the season's more intriguing stories, because he's not really telling anybody about that.
Nancy's going to be the first one to find out.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be great. I don't know why I really want him to be a Hardy boy. I think it's because I read that one line online and now I want it. Like, desperately, it's just sentence and I'm now invested. Like, the crumbs.
I know, like I've heard that from you, and now I'm like, every time I'm like looking for it. I'm like, is his last name Hardy? Is it what's happening?
Can't be unseen now.
No, it cannot be, but I guess we'll find out in season 4 come May.
We
We do have time, thankfully.